And good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Order Paper Show. And I feel absolutely alone here, all by myself. We have apologies from Stacey this week. It's her birthday. She's having the night off. We have apologies from Laura. She's not feeling well and cannot make it. And we also have apologies from Blake, who is also not feeling well and cannot make it. But they will be here in spirit, waiting, and Magenta is on the way. I do know that I got the message was to say they're literally coming in on 8 o'clock, and I'm wondering if the restream link might be the great fun part to sit there and go with it. But yeah, it's going to be there. Now, just for you to know, my BHN Nikki No Boat shirt has arrived. Now, Pat and Chewy, I'd like to have a limited edition that said no boats, and you have under that, how do you? Maybe they could sit there and come out for a 2026 election show, considering, from what I know, I think Nicola Willis is going to try and take the seat in 2026. I mean, she was unsuccessful in 2023. Greg O'Connor really did a really good job actually maintaining it. And I wonder if Nicola Willis will sit there and try and give it another go. So, yes, you can see the shirt that's in action. And just for those who are wondering, the Oahu electorate does have half of the ferry terminal in it, but the road to get in is in the Wellington Central electorate. So, if you ever always wondered why there was the Nikki No Boats in Oahu, there's a bit more to the picture. You could also sit there and have Nikki No Boats in Kaikoura electorate as well, considering that's where the electorate that also the other ferry terminal and a town divided in half with a closed level crossing. Magenta has made it. Welcome to the Order Paper. Welcome to a different software to do the streaming.
Yes. Yeah, I was having a bit of tech issues trying to get in because I'm like, I haven't used this one.
Yeah, no, Restream is a bit different. I prefer it, but that's because I've been using it since 2020. So, and we made a decision when we were re-looking at these things in there. I do like what Rajan's got. What's here? Nikki No Boat to know how to you.
That's
it could be a good way to go down there. Nikki No Boats.
You would just have to make one of those more a text one, I think. Like you don't even do the picture, just Nikki No, and then you just do all the words down.
Yeah. No boats, no Dunedin Hospital, no votes in Oahu or something. Yeah, could be a good long list. Now, when we do get shirts, can you and I, along with every Wellington BHN person, fans who are out there, can we sit there and do a class photo outside Nicola Willis's office in our Nikki No Boat shirts?
I mean, I would be willing to go to Jayville for that. I wouldn't go to Jayville for much, but I'll do it for that.
And while you're up there, you go and get the cheap petrol from Waitomo.
Well, imagine having a car.
Oh, you don't have one?
I used to, but I live on the terrace, so someone crashed into it. Actually, you might have seen it on Vic Deals 4 years
ago. I've been given a lifetime ban to Vic Deals, apparently.
Oh, okay, you wouldn't have seen it on Vic Deals.
Yeah. No, I haven't been part of that group since 2017.
Right.
So I'm not given my lifetime ban.
Fuck, what did you do?
I don't...
How do you get...
I asked what I did wrong so I could not make the same mistake again.
Oh.
And that was enough to sit there and do it, because it's like, just tell me what I've done wrong so then I know what I do it. But the thing is, it's like, what do you call it? You could threaten to kill Don McDonald and be banned, and someone else could threaten him and be given the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, that is pretty big deals, though. I mean, Don Newt is my fucking favorite, though. That
Oh,
man is a legend.
you haven't seen him at a Newtown Residents Association meeting. Oh boy, he
Oh,
sits
nah, see, I
down
wouldn't do
there.
that to
The
myself,
councillors are like you can just hear when he's going like, "Oh God, Don, no," because it's over the most trivialist
Oh, of course,
things.
of course. Don doesn't say anything for anything real or meaningful. He just posts cryptic shit on the internet.
Oh, yeah. Like he even had his one on there was he actually had his of his stuff put into a book.
Oh, of course he fucking did. That is the most Don thing ever. I mean, it was
Yeah.
bad enough when he was running for the city council and I had to read that in our fucking official, like,
in
local
the book.
election booklet. Like, what the hell?
Well, I mean, put it this way: if you sit down there and actually sit there and take a look at it, you can probably sit down there and I've been watching Don in elections since 2016 when I stood for Greater Wellington Regional Council and he stood for was it Southern Ward against Paul Eagle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's how long I've been seeing it on seeing him going through there. I mean, this is like
I didn't live in Wellington in 2016, to be fair.
Yeah. See, I moved to Wellington in 2014, and I pretty much I was in Newtown for ages, and then our landlord gave us a 90-day notice.
Lovely.
Straight after a rent increase. No, straight it was within 2 weeks of the new rent increase to kick in. And the property manager just basically said, "Yeah, sorry, you have to pay the rent increase." And it's just like, you're kicking us out and you're like literally taking away our ability to save up for a bond.
I don't give a fuck.
I mean, I might need to get my friend Keith Powell on here because he actually probably would give a bit more, but he's the usual run-of-the-mill property manager. But then, good old Eric would probably sit down there and call him a Labour voter, even that he is, I wouldn't say a card-carrying national member, but definitely a card-carrying national voter. Yeah, like he said, and he was actually shocked that the person who, he is the property manager for Paul Eagle's Island Bay house since he moved to the Chatham Islands as CEO. And then when Julie and Genta was looking for commercial property, she went to Keith.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's who Keith attracts, because he doesn't attract the scumlord national people. Like, he doesn't want scumlord landlords as his clients. He wants decent people, and he wants regulation of the property sector because it's too much like the Wild West.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Oh yeah. So tonight's agenda. So this week is the near starting of scrutiny week, and we will also cover off two bills. If you remember the last show, we covered the Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill to raise the cap to $60,000. So if something goes wrong with your Tesla, you can go to the Disputes Tribunal. Yeah, I know how I run it. And we will, if we get time, we'll cover the income tax, clean car, Clean Transport Fringe Benefit Tax Exclusion Amendment Bill, which is a bill that actually failed to pass first reading by my local MP, Julie Genta.
Oh, nice.
Oh, I know. But so we're going to show what happens when a member's bill does not cross the line, considering we keep showing bills that actually pass.
True. It has been a little while since we've had a bill not pass.
Or, fail at first reading. Yeah, it's quite in there, yeah. Okay, so let's kick off with what is the Reserve Bank going to start off with? And the great question is, can I speed this up?
Nice.
Yeah, this will be the good part is, when do the words start?
At least they've got a little transcript by the looks there.
Oh, yeah, that's a Venio auto transcript.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Can't see you yet.
No, I can see you. We can, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right. Well, good to go then. Okay, well, thank you. Welcome to the committee. If you'd like to... Oh, now I can see you. Thank you. If you'd like to take us away with an opening statement, please, that'd be great, and then we'll get into questions.
Kia ora koutou. It's great to be here with you today to discuss our November monetary policy statement. I'm Karen Silk, Assistant Governor of the Reserve Bank Money Group and a member of the Monetary Policy Committee. With me today, I have two more members of the Monetary Policy Committee, Deputy Governor Christian Hawkesby and our Chief Economist Paul Conway. Governor Orr extends his apologies. He is attending the annual meeting of the South Pacific Central Bank Governors, but he will be back before you on Wednesday for the Reserve Bank's annual review meeting. So just a few comments to make. The Monetary Policy Committee agreed yesterday to reduce the official cash rate by 50 basis points to 4.25%. Annual consumer price inflation has declined, and it is now close to the midpoint of the Monetary Policy Committee's 1 to 3% target band. Inflation expectations are close to target, and core inflation is also converging to the midpoint. If economic conditions continue to evolve as projected, the committee expects to be able to lower the official cash rate further early next year. Economic activity in New Zealand remains subdued and output continues to be below its potential. With excess productive capacity in the economy, inflation pressures have eased. Domestic price and wage setting behaviours are becoming consistent with inflation remaining near the target midpoint, and the price of imports has also fallen, also contributing to lower headline inflation. Looking forward, economic growth is expected to recover during 2025 as lower interest rates encourage investment and other spending. Employment growth is expected to remain weak until mid-2025. This reflects the normal lag between improvements in activity and employment. For some, however, financial stress will also take some time to ease. Global economic growth is expected to remain subdued in the near term. Geopolitical conditions and policy uncertainty could, however, contribute to increased economic and inflation volatility over the medium term. The Monetary Policy Committee have agreed that having consumer price inflation close to the middle target of its band puts it in the best position to respond to any future potential shocks to inflation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. Start with Barbara Edmonds.
Okay, so that will be kicking off from what, so that's the first one there is the monetary statement. It's the first time we've covered one of these, so we're in uncharted territory, and I feel more nervous the fact that it's, was it you there? I do find it interesting, the day that had to happen was the drop of the OCR, and I'm still amazed that BNZ is still offering a 6-month term deposit at 5.25% interest. I'm still getting that sponsored ad on Facebook.
Oh, God.
Yeah, well, hey, you know, my business and personal banking are with them, but it's in the balance ones with Kiwibank, just for those who are wondering.
Okay, interesting. I just saw an article about Kiwibank being sued for...
overcharging fees?
Yeah, overcharging. Yeah.
Oh, many of the banks, they've been going through different ones. It's Kiwibank's turn at the moment.
Oh, they're just making their way through them all, are they?
Yeah, no, they're definitely going through all of them.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's get to the fun part of hearing the questions from the from the MPs.
Kia ora, Karen Silk, and Paul and Christian. My question really, I've got a series of questions mainly around sort of economic activity and GDP. Is the decision to reduce interest rates a sign of strength or weakness in the economy, given that interest rates have fallen 150 basis points recently? Is that because the economy has gotten a lot weaker or for some other reason?
So the ability for us to continue to lower interest rates reflects a few things. It reflects, firstly, that headline inflation has moved back into the target band in the September quarter. That is a response of both a decline in import prices, so tradable inflation coming down. It's also a reflection that domestic inflation has fallen through that period as well. Looking forward, it also reflects that GDP, what we have, it also reflects that we've got spare capacity in the economy. Which has come about as a result of restrictive monetary policy. And so that is allowing us, that is feeding into inflation and is allowing us to move on interest rates. Do you want to add anything to that, Paul?
Oh, I'd just add, I mean, it's a good thing that we're able to lower interest rates. It means that we're getting through the burst of inflation that we experienced coming out the back of COVID. We're getting on top of that. Normal service is resuming as far as the economy goes, and we're moving interest rates back to what we call neutral, getting back into that neutral zone. So it's good news.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it is welcome, but as you say, there's still, it's going to take time for that change to bed in for some people. And obviously with unemployment being higher, that's a concern that I have at front of mind. Going to GDP, because you mentioned it, but also, this is something that a lot of parties are talking about. With quarterly production GDP forecast of December this year being lower than what they were in June, predicted in June 23, where do you believe that short-term engine of growth for the economy is if business investment, residential investment, government investment is falling? Well, at least according to your November MPS forecast.
Yeah, so you're right that GDP, our forecasts have GDP still showing relative weakness. For that September quarter, we are forecasting an improvement starting from this current quarter. what we've seen in terms of the weakness, it's varied among sectors, and that's been reinforced in we've done 85 business visits in the past quarter, talking directly with businesses. What it reflects is that the greatest weakness we've had in those sectors that have been most impacted or are most impacted by and influenced by interest rates. As we look forward into moving into growth next year, we think those same sectors are the sectors that will reflect growth earlier as well. So we think about, when you think about that, residential investment, manufacturing and retail trade are probably the areas that were most, construction on that side of it, the most ones that were most impacted on the way down. They will be the ones that we will start to see more recovery in through that earlier part of 2025.
And it's true, like we're seeing the trough in growth about now. We're seeing growth picking up, I should say, from around now. And you're quite right. Like it's not like we're going, we're not predicting a spectacular economic boom or anything like that. We're projecting the output gap to close, and longer term, we're projecting growth in that sort of 2.5 sort of zone, a sort of pedestrian New Zealand level GDP growth rate.
So compared to, because some of your forecasts have some of our trading partners' GDP, and they're running much faster than New Zealand over the next few quarters. Can you explain why the US, the UK and Australia are seeing faster economic growth?
Or do you want to talk about productivity? And
well, that's the main kind of driver there. I should also add our GDP numbers, like Stats NZ put out an advisory yesterday morning, saying that they're going to revise them up over the last couple of years. And they're reasonably significant. I think it's 2% in terms of expenditure GDP and 1.3 in terms of 1.3 in terms of expenditure GDP and 2% in terms of production GDP. But it's still, that's true. We have not had a strong period of growth. Growth has been at best sideways over the last couple of years. And if you compare that to the likes of the United States, that's probably the sort of poster child for getting inflation down in a high growth environment. And the difference there is productivity. Productivity is effectively the speed limit for the economy, because we've got relatively weak productivity growth compared to our peer international economies. It means that actual growth has had to be slower than in those other economies to get excess productive capacity into our economy, which has been necessary to bring down that domestic inflation pressures that Karen was talking about.
And sorry, Mr. Chair, one last one, if that's okay.
Cool. Yep.
So speaking to the US, do you see any key risks to the economy from the new US administration, and any risks to inflation forecasts as a consequence?
Look, certainly that was a point of discussion for the Monetary Policy Committee, just thinking more broadly about global issues in the medium term, potential impacts of geopolitical tensions that can include policy changes, and as well as escalation of warfare in both the Middle East and Ukraine and Russia. The committee certainly that creates uncertainty for us moving forward, and it can have an impact on both inflation and growth. Certainly from a global perspective, it probably has a net inflationary impact at global level, and a potentially negative impact on growth. Because the other point around that is China and some of the cyclical and structural issues that they will need to deal with. Now it can have upside and downside depending on how this plays out. Tariffs generally are not a good thing from a relative price perspective. Likewise, where tariffs are introduced, those that are producing, selling into economies that are imposing tariffs may well seek substitute markets. And so we could see effective dumping of goods as part of it as well. And so for New Zealand, we've got to think about the context of how all of those things play out. We could see disinflation on the tradable side as a consequence of cheaper goods like EVs coming into this market, as well as on the upside impacts for exports of our export and import prices from the imposition of tariffs.
I should add, if I may, we haven't formally modelled any of the potential impacts of President-elect Trump coming back into power, but the committee's seen it more as increased relative price shifts, so more inflation volatility going forward from the things Karen was talking about. And I'll add climate change into that mix as well, weather-related events.
The thing that the committee is absolutely clear on is that the very best thing we can do is to ensure that we have inflation at or around that midpoint of our target, because that creates the best optionality for us to respond to any potential future shocks.
Which is pretty much where we've got it.
Yeah.
Okay, Catherine?
Okay, I definitely would have to say whoever is controlling the zoom on the cameras is definitely using a different model to how other committees operate, but I'm not used to the Finance and Expenditure Committee, Zoom operator.
No, yeah, that's a bit random.
Yeah.
I mean,
useful questions and information from Barbara Edmonds.
I mean, she always has useful questions and fucking information, and my camera's being a cunt. Sorry. I'm getting frustrated. I tried to do something different, and that's what I get for doing something different.
Oh, especially when you're live.
Yeah, she'll be right.
Yeah, yes, exactly. That's a good Kiwi attitude.
Yeah. It's
Really
this live stream is about as put together right now as this government is. So.
Your aspect of it.
Wow, yeah. Hey, I mean, we had a bunch of people not turn up.
Oh yeah. I've not had a situation where I've had half the panelists just not come, and all of that came through while I was driving back from Porora to Rangatahi with the coffee cart, and because I can't take it on the motorway because my vehicle and my trailer just don't work. The combination doesn't work. So I think when you contacted me, I was going down Middleton Road. When Blake contacted me, I was going down the Keys, and when Laura contacted me, I think I just got to Rangatahi. Yeah, it was just like
Yeah.
It was just like, what the hell? And I'm like, I hadn't even finished driving.
Damn.
Okay, let's see what the next question comes up.
Oh, thank you very much. Look, the Reserve Bank's previous moves, one could say, were more lax in terms of the approach, which obviously, hurt homeowners a lot. Obviously, these moves in the last two announcements are a lot more bolder. Do you think that you could have potentially taken a more aggressive approach, and what do you feel were the risks and implications of that?
Yeah, so our objective is price stability and that is a low and stable inflation. Is that the very good news is that headline inflation has got back to 2.2%, so within the target 1 to 3% target range in the September quarter. But there's unders and overs in that. So on one hand, we weak global growth, lowering of inflation offshore has supported lower import prices here in New Zealand. So tradables inflation fell quite significantly. Fuel is a great example of that. On the other hand, while we've got domestic inflation also falling, that is still remains well outside of the target range. And so from our perspective, getting core inflation, and that means we need to get domestic inflation, continue to bring that down. That means that we need to continue, we've needed to continue to take demand out of the economy. And so the pace of easing that you have seen has been reflective of getting the balance of risks right from that perspective. So as we said, the good news is that spare capacity that has risen in the economy as a result of that restrictive monetary policy is now giving us confidence that domestic inflation, those domestic inflation numbers can continue to come down, and that is allowing us to start to accelerate the easing cycle.
I think it's it's sort of like I think your question is sort of hinting, did we need to go as high as 5.5 before coming down and easing down 125 basis points over the last 3 months. I think we'll obviously be doing a full review of the disinflation in the kind of natural course of our business. And in a sense, it's too early to tell, if that path for monetary policy has been optimal. But I will say early indications that we've called the disinflation reasonably well. Our forecasts have been, just from sort of eyeballing them, have been reasonably accurate on the way down. But as I said, I don't want to get too definitive about it at this point, and we'll do a full review.
And the other thing is, obviously, those high interest rates have really hurt, growth in the economy, from a business perspective, but also just in general home ownership and mortgages, and obviously, having that disposable income in the economy to grow it.
Growth in the economy coming out of COVID was too strong, which is part of the reason why we had inflation in the first place. So the economy was growing at an unsustainable rate. So the job of monetary policy was to take a bit of the heat out of the place. And all indications are the fact that inflation's in the midpoint of the band is that we've managed to do that, and fully recognise that it hasn't been a fun ride for New Zealanders, particularly people with mortgages, but not only, with unemployment nudging up and the like. But we do what we do for the long-term benefit of prosperity and well-being in the economy.
And you mentioned in the monetary statement, obviously, some of the positive policy announcements coming out from the government around interest deductibility and the bright line test, and obviously the impact that's going to start having. When do you envisage that will start kind of kicking in and having that positive impact?
Are you talking about housing?
Yes, housing.
Yeah, so we've got a 6.8% increase in house prices next year. I should say house prices are notoriously difficult to predict, to forecast. But the effects of those types of policy shifts are part of the reason why we've got that 6.8% in there. I should say we're not forecasting a boom in house prices. We sort of see, and which I think is a good thing from a housing affordability perspective. But we do see a little bit more life coming into the housing market than what we've seen over recent years.
And just one last quick question, if I may, Chair. Obviously the dairy price is high at the moment. Our dairy sector is a large part of our economy. There wasn't a lot of mention of it in the monetary statement, but that, of course, will impact our economy, positively. Why was that not kind of reflected as much as it could have been, I think, in the monetary policy statement?
So it does get reflected in terms of commentary around exports, and we do talk to both dairy and meat prices increasing off the back of that. Look, it is wonderful to see one sector of the economy, performing well and benefiting from really changes in supply globally. And so, some of the more recent increases we've seen are with the Chinese buyers coming back into the market. They're looking to stockpile again. So, the real challenge, I think, still for the sector is that it is volatile, right? And so you can, should we expect to see $10 a kilo of milk solids, remaining for the next 2 years? I suspect not. It's not proven to be the case in history, but it is really good to see that benefit coming through.
Thank you. Chloe.
Okay, so those are the questions from Catherine Weird. You can definitely tell as an ex-TV personality, she knows how to do a camera properly.
Yeah, but you could also tell I didn't know who she was, but I was like, this lady's giving me yucky national vibes. And I was obviously right.
Oh, you got that feeling.
Well, yeah, because she was like, oh, what about homeowners? As if she's not fucking talking about people who want to sell houses. I'm sorry, she's not concerned about homeowners. She's concerned about property fucking buying and selling. That was so obvious.
No, she's definitely a little bit more tame than some of the other national MPs out there. She is, from my perspective, she's never, I don't think she's even featured on our show before, so we've not actually seen her in action. And I've got a bit more positive from her than probably, say, other Patsy-style questions that you typically get from some of the national people. Like, I remember watching the Māori Wards, referendum bill, and apart from James Meagher, most
really
of the national questions that came from national were like baiting sort of things. But then if you look at Todd Stevenson, he actually asked serious questions.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't really care about who she is. It's more just I didn't like her questions. They came across as clearly like trying to come across as concerned for the your everyman when she's clearly not. And I don't care if she's not as bad as other national members. She's still yuck.
Well, and she is the first term MP.
Well, yeah. I mean, she's got to show that she's worried about business people's.
I think she is Catherine Weird. No, she's Tuki. No, I was going to say Napier, but no, she's actually Tuki, not Napier. Yeah. No,
that's why I googled her because I've never heard of her before. But I was like,
oh, she was on One News for years.
I don't reckon. Or maybe she just looks different.
Yeah. Well, she is a bit older.
Well, yeah. I mean, when was she on the news?
Oh, like all through my 20s.
Well, how old are you then? That doesn't help me. Oh, okay. Then, yeah, I must.
I'm not that much older than you.
To be fair, I actually didn't. No, you're not younger than me. I'm 30. Thank you very much.
I said I'm not much older than you.
Nah, you said younger, but that's okay.
No, I was older.
But no, I just didn't. To be fair, I didn't have a TV in my early 20s.
Yeah.
So, fuck. She could have been on TV, and I've never heard of her.
Oh, see, I had it, but then I had like 1.5 megabyte per second, broadband when I was like living rural living, so yeah.
Oh, God, yeah, nah, fair enough. See, whereas I at least had good internet when I had it.
Yeah. Okay, let's head off to Chloe Swarbrick by the looks of it. I think she's the only Chloe on the Finance and Expenditure Committee.
I was just wondering if you could help explain what's occurring or what your understanding is of what's happening per figure 4.2, page 28 of the Monetary Policy Statement, particularly on economic activity in selected sectors. So what we can see from that is in the first 9 months of this year, that production in GDP growth was pretty much isolated to home ownership and rental services and to government services.
Whoa,
the decline in manufacturing, wholesale trade services, construction.
Because you might need to turn Chloe down a little.
Some more granular questions, particularly about kind of the sensitivity to monetary policy, which you obviously speak about in Oversight following that.
I think we might have to go to.
But I guess, if you could just explain what the impact of monetary policy has been to see that occur, and the intersection potentially with fiscal and what you see as the role or the parameters of monetary versus fiscal and impacting those different sectors.
Yeah, thanks, Chloe. So, I mean, the interesting thing about, from a sort of more academic perspective about this period we've been going through is the slowdown in the economy. It has been, to a large extent, engineered by the Monetary Policy Committee by higher interest rates. So in terms of, and it's been broadly flat over the last 2 years. It might be a little bit up now, GDP growth, given the revisions that, or the hinted at revisions that came out yesterday. But within that, there's been unders and overs. And because the slowdown has been engineered by monetary policy, it's been those sectors of the economy that are sensitive to interest rates that have slowed down. And you can see that in figure 4.1, the kind of more goods, Karen talked about them earlier, goods producing, retail, construction, manufacturing, all those types of industries that are sensitive to interest rates have slowed down, whereas other parts of the economy, have grown through that period. And a lot of that is home ownership and rental services. We've had very strong population growth. Government services, business services have, on average, sort of contributed or sort of offset the declines in activity that we've seen in those other more interest rate parts of the economy. So kind of going forward, as interest rates fall, sort of cutting back to the earlier question, we think it's those bits of the economy that are sensitive to interest rates that are sort of going to lead in terms of that economic recovery, whereas those other sectors will probably just, keep trucking along doing what they've been doing anyways.
Yeah, I guess if I may just finish that point, because obviously, CPI inflation figures out of stats show that actually rent price inflation is double what CPI inflation is.
Yeah.
And we just also had that question from Catherine regarding the changes to the interest deductibility rules and bright line test and how actually that's potentially going to result in higher inflation and particularly housing. So I guess, to your point just then, Paul, about how monetary policy was engineering the kind of slowdown of the economy, given that we now have a situation where kind of RBNZ is saying that we want to speed up the economy, i.e. that we want, more spending, but we've got kind of austerity or contractionary fiscal policy in place. How will that play out? And, does that not mean, especially with those specific fiscal policies around kind of interest deductibility and the bright line test, that we're not just going to see more runaway kind of house price and rental inflation? And how do you see that playing out?
Yeah. So like in terms of rents, we've got one measure of the stock, the rentals across the stock of houses, and then we've got a measure of rentals of rents, for the flow, for sort of new, or as tenancies kind of change over. And that flow measure is dropping as you'd expect. We've got weaker population growth. Migration has fallen pretty dramatically. So we would expect that to feed into the kind of stock measure through time. So I'm not sure if we explicitly sort of forecast rent prices, but we're not, with the housing market in general, we're not projecting a sort of runaway house price, and I would think that's about the same. With rents. On fiscal policy more generally, in a way, we sort of, take what we're given from the government. They set fiscal policy and we adjust interest rates accordingly. If we think fiscal policy, or if we think the economy is growing too fast and fiscal could be a component of that, then, we do what we've been doing. We have good communications with the Treasury. We have a Treasury observer in Monetary Policy meetings, so we feel, we're well up on what's happening fiscally, but essentially we sort of just take it as a given and adjust interest rates accordingly.
And I guess further to that point, I'm back on the whole issue of kind of distributional impacts, i.e. who are the winners and who are the losers as a result of decisions that are being made here. And, Karen, in your opening remarks, you were talking about spare capacity in the economy. There we're talking about people who are unemployed or underemployed, and we know that those figures have gone up. These are real people, and same goes for kind of when we're talking about housing and what the ostensible drivers of kind of growth for GDP growth are. We're talking about higher house prices, same goes for CPI inflation at the moment, with higher rental prices and the suffering that renters are going through. So I guess, has there been any analysis? I couldn't, in my read through the monetary policy statement, just today haven't managed to find any specific notation of it. But I guess just how do you see this playing out with regard to kind of inequality in the country in the last year as a result of that interaction of monetary and fiscal policy decisions?
Like I sent you a note actually after our last FEC on inequality. I'll follow up on that and make sure that you got it. Our stock standard line to that, which is right, is that monetary policy is a really broad tool. And as Karen was saying on the radio this morning, it's kind of it can be messy from a sort of allocative perspective, but there's not a lot that we can do. We all use the same money. We don't have sort of separate interest rates for different groups in society. So it's up to other arms of the government to deal with the distributional consequences of monetary policy and distributional consequences in general. Your stuff on the labour market is interesting. Like, definitely monetary policy puts a cycle through the labour market, but if you want to get unemployment, for example, down, on average over the cycle in a more structural sense, there's policy settings that the government has at its disposal to there's options for that.
What we do, what is really clear though is that inflation affects everybody, and the best thing that we can do is ensure that we have low and stable inflation, because that will create greater certainty. It does improve investment in the economy, and that is to the benefit of everybody across the economy. So that is the best thing that the best tool we have available in order to be able to support better economic wellbeing for all New Zealanders.
And as far as, and just to, I guess, clarify and to round that out, if I may, with my final question, Chair, what you're saying there is monetary policy is a blunt instrument, and as far as the distributional impacts, i.e. potential greater inequality that we may be seeing as a result of higher house prices, unemployment, and otherwise, is something for the government to deal with through fiscal policy. Thank you.
Okay, Nancy.
Okay, so let's hold off on there. Chloe, as usual, hitting it out like crazy.
Fucking queen. That's why.
Yeah. So what's the name of the cat, since everyone's asking? I think someone may have already put the answer.
I put it in there. It's Stretch. Her name is Stretch Armstrong. We call her Dingus because she's a dingus. She's a cat. But yes, she's a ragamuffin. So she's very fluffy and very big. 7 kgs.
Oh, is that huge for a cat?
Not for her breed. So her breed, the females get up to around 7 kgs and the boys get up to 10 kgs. So
oh god,
it's a very big. She got fat ass.
Yeah. Okay. Let's. I think the next one is Nancy Lou, just because I think she's the only Nancy MP we have.
And regulatory.
Good morning.
And let's speed it up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we won't need them slowed down now.
Sorry.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair. So my question is actually, first part of my question is a follow-up to Barbara's comments and questions around the US election. So in your answers, you've also mentioned that you've not yet done a model in terms of what the possible impacts could be with the new US government and the potential raise in tariffs. So can I understand, will a model be done? And if so, how? When are we expecting to hear something from you, or you won't be doing a model?
We'll be incorporating it into our existing modelling technology, and we'll no doubt do empirics. We'll do research on the effects of globalisation on inflation, that kind of thing.
Just if I could add, the US administration have sort of stated policies in terms of their trade policies. We're going to learn a lot. A lot's going to play out over time as they interact with other countries and as the actually implemented policies become clearer, and that's what we'll take into account with monetary policy. And we have the benefit that we meet every 6 weeks, and so we can update that view as the picture becomes clearer. In parallel, we'll also work with our financial stability hats on the different scenarios that could play out in more extreme cases, and work through from a system stability how they would impact us and how resilient our financial system is to those more severe scenarios that are less likely to play out, but ones that we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, and if we've talked about the expectation of quite the real potential for volatility through that period, and of course we're also very well positioned to help support markets and pricing and stability within markets from that perspective, as well as a consequence of the reserves we hold.
And please don't get me wrong. The point I was making is we haven't formally incorporated it into the set of projections in this MPS. We've obviously been talking and thinking about it a lot, but currently we're seeing it as a sort of medium-term risk to inflation volatility. And as Christian says, as those policies become clearer, it'll sort of get deeper into our explicit projections for what's happening globally.
And thank you for that answer. And if you can please help me to understand more around, you talked about the 6 weeks that you meet and discuss, etc. You have reserves plenty in place to help support. But when major policies in major countries like the US announce any policy on any country or on any sector, it has a direct and immediate impact on the sectors. And it will impact, for example, as soon as something is announced, you will see a change in our New Zealand in our foreign exchange rate with the US. So it has a very immediate direct impact on our sectors, particularly on the exports. So I'm trying to, and I also understand, look, the Reserve Bank can't be moving up and down with any policy at all times. But how do you balance that between looking out into the medium to longer term, but how market is reacting very, very quickly to external factors?
So there's a couple of things there. You're right, volatility can occur very quickly as a consequence of announcements. We have to look at fuel prices as a great example, right? Oil moves up and down in response to certain policies and market conditions all of the time. What we have to do is stand back and go, how much of this is transitionary? And therefore we should look through, because our obligation is a medium term. We're taking a medium term position versus actually what do we see that may create a more permanent shift. And therefore we need to accommodate that in those forecasts. The currency is a small, with a floating currency, it's almost a buffer, and it responds and adapts and helps take shock out of the economy and smooth that over time. So we should expect our currency to move in response to those sorts of things. It's where it gets to, and to extreme levels, and cannot be justified from an economic perspective that we would start to get very concerned and perhaps look to do something about that. But as you will have seen over history, that is a very rare occasion that you would expect us to be able to do that. We do have the expectation it will move. Paul, do you just want to talk a little bit more about how we will think about, or how we bake in that longer term view?
Yeah. So like one of the many beauties of the flexible inflation targeting framework that we use here, markets know how we will react in time, and if something big moves offshore, and if it's negative for New Zealand, the currency will depreciate, and that may well be appropriate, and it doesn't require the central bank to do anything at that time. And as Karen's saying, if things sort of do get out of whack and get away from the economic fundamentals, then maybe there is an interest rate response required. But we can't foresee what President-elect Trump. He talks a lot, but what's going to actually be put into place? It would be remiss of us to be sort of reacting. We'd be boxing at shadows currently if we were to incorporate that. I don't even know what it means, lower interest rates or higher interest rates.
Could it not be said now that the softening of our dollar since the Trump has been elected is reflecting that buffering that you mentioned before?
Yes, it is. So markets have taken in, the market view is that this has potential inflationary impacts in the US. US interest rates have strengthened off the back of that. We get the interest rate differential position between us and yes, the currency, that is being reflected in the currency.
Okay, thanks, Deb.
Thank you. I've just wanted to dig into some of the details.
Okay, I think we're off to another MP, but you definitely tell Nancy he's using a smartphone. Have you muted yourself?
Yeah, sorry, I did. I mute it so that you don't hear sirens and shit.
Oh, heck. So which apartment buildings managed to kick off the fire alarm?
Oh, Jesus, yeah. Nah, thankfully, it's usually just the emergency services. But, yeah, nah, looks like in the chat someone called her out for the laptop, which I thought was funny. I also like if someone also noticed her use the term buffer, and I'm just like, hey.
No, if someone wants to see Nancy Lou a buffer t-shirt, why not go onto the BHU website and order one and send it to her?
They missed it. The shop closed on Friday.
Oh, bugger. Oh, well.
They have to wait till next month. Or, well, I'm assuming I don't know. I don't make the merch, so I'm not going to make any claims.
No, we're in December now, so next month could be. Are they meant to be doing some big tour in January?
Well, they're going to Waitangi in whenever Waitangi Day is. My brain's just gone blank. February, beginning of February, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dates, but nah.
It's all right.
I know they
Barlow's on a tour around New Zealand at some point as well.
Sorry, who?
Paul Barlow. Paul, the other one?
Oh, yes. I was like, for some reason, the last name Barlow made me think of fucking Coronation Street.
Hey, I could always mention Auntie Susie. She's also a Barlow. And she says all Kiwis who are Barlows are good people.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Okay, I think the next one is Deborah Russell.
A little bit. So I was looking at the statistical tables and some of the commentary around them. And so starting that first table and looking at GDP growth, negative 0.2 in June, and you're saying negative 0.2 again, we think, in September. I guess we're waiting for the latest data. And then you're saying, and on page 45, I think you're saying you think it's going to start picking up again in the December quarter. What are you'll be monitoring it all the time. What are you seeing so far in terms of what's happening in the December quarter?
So we so we've got a negative 0.2 for September, which we've had. We're in the December quarter now, pretty much, or getting into the second half of it. And these projections are hot off the press, obviously. So all of the high frequency data that we've had available to us over the last 6 weeks are consistent with that 0.3. And I'll also say, we visited 85 Kiwi businesses in the lead up to this monetary policy statement, and that 0.3 in the December quarter is consistent with what we were hearing on average across that group of businesses, which is about demand, starting to turn in the economy, a bit more sort of optimism out there in terms of people's spending habits and investment intentions. inflation pretty much in the middle of the target, and interest rates coming down. It makes sense. So we stand by these forecasts. They're literally a few days old, so we've seen nothing. The thing from stats, the kind of upward revision from stats, we'll obviously have to factor those in. Important to say that those increases in GDP over the last 2 years, some of that will be demand effects, some of it will be supply effects. On balance, what does it mean for our output gap, which is our measure of spare capacity in the economy? And we use a whole range of data to come up with that output gap. So we're still reasonably confident that the Stats NZ release and all the high frequency data that we've seen is consistent with the numbers in the back of the NPS.
So thank you. So one of the things that we're still predicting, even though we think the economy is picking up a little, but we're also seeing unemployment continue upwards. And I think also labour force underutilisation, not just unemployment underutilisation, is still, well, it looks high to me. I don't know whether that 11.6 at the end of September is high, or it's slightly down on the last quarter, but if you could just talk us through a little bit that in terms of when we can expect to see people getting jobs again and getting as much work as they want again.
So, labour market, we talk about lags between activity in the economy and what's happening in the labour market. So, even though growth has turned, and it's not a dramatic kind of uptick in growth or anything like that, we're sort of, just bending the line a bit, it's moving in the right direction, but it's, it's not a huge boom that we're projecting or anything like that. And it takes a while for that increase in spending to sort of be reflected in firms' hiring intentions. So we do have unemployment ticking up to 5.2%. I think that's in the March, that is in the March quarter of next year, which is around the corner, really. And then we will see conditions in the labour market more generally start to improve as the New Zealand economy sort of heads back to its kind of more neutral sort of growth path. So, as Karen said in her opening remarks, we fully acknowledge that there's more people are going to feel the effects of the slowdown that we've been living through for the last couple of years. Financial hardship will increase for some people out there, unfortunately. But, there's certainly light at the end of the tunnel. We do see those conditions improving as growth gets going.
It's interesting because throughout the monetary policy statement, you talk about the labour market conditions easing and things like that. And I'm never quite sure what that means, because my concern always in the labour market is that people have jobs, whereas you talk about labour market easing, and it seems to be lower wage inflation and things like that, which is a bit easier for employers and things like that. So talk me through why you would use that kind of language to describe more people unemployed.
You're starting from a point of saying the labour market conditions were really tight. So there wasn't a lot of excess labour force in the market, so and businesses were finding it incredibly difficult to find people. High churn going on across the market as people were moving into different roles, and wage growth and wage costs increasing quite substantially as a consequence of that. So it's an easing off from a tight condition.
We think about our language in a sort of more retail way or something.
I appreciate you. I just think more people in work is a good thing. But I appreciate that churn is always expensive anyway.
Thank you. We need to move on.
I've got one more question, if I may. It's quite an important one. And I'd like to just go to a question. It's on page 53, and I was looking at import prices. So it's the table on page 53, and it goes to in 2022, import prices. The increase in them, as far as the percentage change, was 18.8% from in 2021. It was down negative 2.5%. And it just makes me think, how much of that inflation that we have experienced, that's clearly inflationary, those import prices. So how much of our inflation was actually imported inflation rather than, if you like, domestic inflation?
A great deal was imported. Like that's sort of where the inflation surge started. It started internationally and came over our border through that almost 20% increase in inflation, in imported inflation prices. Which is the kind of thing, what can we do about that as the New Zealand Central Bank? Not a lot. But then it did sort of get embedded in people's expectations for inflation in New Zealand going forward. So price setting behaviour became consistent with a high inflation environment, which is what we've needed to lean against. But that global, COVID was a global shock. So it spilled over our borders big time in the early days.
And I'm assuming we're still just feeling the after effects of that in many ways, with that high inflation then coming down again.
We're seeing the unwind. And so with tradables inflation, at the levels it's at, we're getting through the unwind of that.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
I've got Jamie, Megan.
Okay, so how do we rate Deb's questions?
I liked how fucking aggressive she was. It was great.
Well, she is a tax expert.
And I mean, she knows her shit.
Yeah, I can see her, if Barbara Edmonds doesn't end up being the next Labour Minister of Finance, it's going to be Deborah Russell.
True.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know much about her specifically, but I mean, it was good to see a Labour minister focusing on people in jobs. It was.
Labour member, just to be correct, because most ministers don't sit on select committees, but she is a former minister, so yes, that would be correct. And one of her portfolios was statistics.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can kind of see in the way that she's just like, why are you describing it like that? That was great. I love that.
Yeah, the time we get to see our MPs shine.
All right.
Okay, I think the next one is Jamie Arbuckle.
And Ryan, go. So.
Thank you. I just with the announcement of the 50 basis point drop, like New Zealanders, I think
smartphone.
the country are so relieved to see that. But unusual in your report, I thought was you. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing because it's actually a good direction. Is you're actually saying early next year we could be seeing further drops. I'm just wondering how confident you are in that projection. And you did talk a little bit domestically and some issues that could crop in to actually. And if I think about like the house prices, what are those things domestically that could actually stop that possible drop early next year?
Yeah. So it is good, and the committee, and as expressed by the Governor at the press meeting yesterday, the committee, based on the economic conditions that we're expecting, we would be very confident of being able to cut interest rates again early into the new year. The thing that domestically, if we think about the thing that could stop that is if we continue to see persistence in domestic inflation, and that would largely be as a consequence of the adjustment in price setting and wage setting behaviours not flowing through as we are expecting them to. The good thing that we are seeing is that price setting behaviours are starting to adapt to a lower inflation environment, and that's what we need to continue to see in order for us to be able to continue to that easing cycle.
If I just take you across to the Tasman, to Australia, our cash rates now are very similar, but we seem to be in a better position. Our projections with inflation seems to be better, and I'm just wondering what learning could you take out of that? Because it looks like we've got one up on the Australians for once.
Yeah, so the Australian economy is in a very different part of the cycle to us at the moment. They still have relatively tight labour market conditions. Government spending is continuing. Well, it hasn't slowed as a consequence of that, and so growth in that economy is still at a reasonable level. Their core inflation, so headline inflation, may have fallen, but the part of that is a consequence of subsidies on electricity prices. Has been a very big mover for them, and that their core inflation still remains outside of the band, and they have indicated that there is still some way to go before they would feel comfortable to be in a position to say that core inflation's headed in the right direction, and they've got the ability to ease.
I think there's a lot for us to learn from the two different approaches to monetary policy across the Tasman. It kind of cuts to the earlier question, do you think you've overdone it?
Yeah.
We compare what we've done to what Australia's done. It's a wonderful natural experiment for the macro researchers among us. So we'll be looking closely at that over through time as well.
Okay, Megan.
Gee, he was quick. Didn't really sit down there and say that long on questions on that one.
I mean, I guess he knew what he wanted. Didn't have much to ask.
Yeah, probably when you're that far down the chain.
Well, true. I guess also maybe, some of his questions might have gotten stolen by that point too.
Yeah, that is certainly true. By the sounds of the next one is Megan Woods. Let's kick it off.
And two questions. One's a bit a follow-up to Deb's question around unemployment. I'm just wondering, the really good stats kind of showing those projections, but whether there's any more segmentation that sits behind that, either from a geographical point of view or from a population groups point of view, or whether you just do the top line number.
On unemployment,
I'm just thinking, actually, I'll just find the right page.
Karen, maybe while you do that, I could just ask my next question.
Sorry, page 12 of the monetary policy statement. I will give the little editorial. The team's spent an enormous amount of work doing the research and preparing this document. It's got some fantastic data in it. Page 12 has our labour market indicator suite sitting in it, the heat map sitting there. That gives you more of a breakdown.
So we've talked a lot about unemployment on the score, which is totally legitimate, but we do look at a wide range of labour market indicators to get a sense of how hot or not or easing, to use that kind of ineffective language, is in the labour market. So we do cut it by or look at cuts of it by ethnicity and
gender,
age and gender and
Yeah, no, and I had seen your marketing had worked previously, Karen. I had seen the heat map, so that's good. I'm just really wondering about that geographical breakdown as well, because I think we're seeing across the country that there's quite different experiences of how things are playing out. Whether there was anything that you had that's not in the documents you've given us.
No, there's nothing in there that doesn't, or maybe that's something we can bring through. But it's
links to that story. Yeah, that's right. That links to that story around the interest rate sensitive sectors feeling the effects of monetary policy on the upside and the downside.
You're in a dairy, if you're sitting in the Waikato, rural Waikato area, parts of the South Island, you are going to be seeing the benefit of an increase into the economy, higher dairy milk prices. Now, I would caveat that slightly because it's not like farm costs have not gone up; they have as well. So that's not a direct pass through.
It also highlights the importance of granular data. The more we can understand in detail, instead of looking at macro aggregates, there's a big push around here to look at more granular data, which will give us exactly the types of insights that you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you. And just my other question was just really interested in kind of what thinking's going on, that you talked about one of the things that you can't foresee into the future and it isn't included in your modelling is climate-related weather events and the economic impacts of those. And just wondering kind of where the bank's thinking about how we do start to model those in terms of, I mean, obviously there's a great deal of uncertainty and we never know when they're coming, but we are seeing them more frequently. And whether there is work that the bank's doing, working with Treasury in terms of how we do those climate, that kind of risk, how we account for it in the government accounts as well in terms of risk.
Yeah. So we do modelling of how a climate shock will sort of feed through the economy to sort of understand the macro impacts of, say, Cyclone Gabrielle. So we are modelling it. We are thinking empirically about the effects of climate change, but you can't see them coming. So you can't sort of put it into your forward path and say there's going to be a hurricane in 2017 Q2.
Yeah, a lot more of our sort of what if modelling is around the stress testing scenarios that we put to the financial system, whether they can withstand different types of shocks. And that program of stress testing has moved over time from focusing on macroeconomic shocks into focusing on climate shocks and the like. And so that's a really big focus for us in that area.
That also picks up how banks are thinking about adaptation and transition costs as well. And so how are they thinking about that in terms of their own lending criteria?
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay, so that is... Megan's got some good questions.
Yeah. Seems like...
We've been watching one of these because this is not something that... It just seems very straightforward.
Yeah, which is kind of nice, to be honest. It's refreshing.
Yeah, it is. It was not something that, because I mean, it's a weird one trying to follow this, but because we've done select committee hearings and all that, but this is just a very different thing again. Okay, I think the next one is someone called Ryan. There is Ryan Hamilton from Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you to the three of you. Two quick questions, I guess, in closing. Just a comparative. We've touched on that, some of the OECD stuff and comparisons, but your forecast compared to Treasury's forecast, 0.1 to 0.4% versus Treasury's, you're almost a third of, I guess, you're a third more sober than they were in their expectations. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So what? Sorry, Ryan, what macro variable is that?
In the Treasury's forecast, you in over years 25, 26, and 27, you were forecasting sort of 0.1 to 0.4% growth versus what they were getting up to is 1.2%, which is still quite, I guess, low growth rates. But your forecast was even.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Treasury budget forecasts, which have been a little bit above where the Reserve Bank has seen economic growth. There was a speech last week by Dominic Stevens, which sort of cast some doubt on those Treasury forecasts. I don't think they've been formally incorporated into their publicly available projections yet, but I think that's consistent with Treasury sort of coming, I mean, you use the word sober, coming towards a more sober assessment of growth prospects in this economy.
Okay. Look, at the risk of saying something a little bit political, you can respond purely with the data. But in terms of the productivity, there was a lot of commentary earlier about a very low productivity compared to overseas. Wouldn't it be fair to say with growth rate of sort of 30% plus into government departments and now a bit of a reset there, potentially it takes one working citizen to pay through their tax for the expense of that worker. Isn't it only natural now we're going to have a massive reset given we've A, reduced a lot of that government expenditure, and B, we've had such a growth in that government, even with respect within your own department in comms and things like that, that it's going to have an impact on the productivity and it's going to take a long time to undo that.
I'm going to public sector productivity is a key issue for this economy, for any economy that doesn't get talked about enough. It's one of the many, improving public sector productivity is one of the many things we need to do to lift our aggregate productivity performance. So that's about getting more, for less across the public sector.
But it's not the only thing. So productivity more generally, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about public or private sector, because private sector productivity needs to improve substantially as well, is all about getting right access to capital coming in, faster adoption of technology, and investing in R&D and innovation, getting your education settings right. These are all things that actually don't sit within the wheelhouse of monetary policy. They are firmly in the wheelhouse of businesses and the government to take actions, and quite frankly, New Zealanders in the way that we do things, the way that we invest, whether it's into a house or whether it's into something which is more productive. These are the things that need to be talked about and thought about more broadly. It is not just a public sector; it is a total economy story.
No, thank you. I'll take it as confirmation we're on the right track.
Thank you, and thank you very much. Just one comment from me, / question. You touched on that just before, Paul. Dominic Stevens gave a speech last week. I appreciate the monetary policy statement is backward-looking to a great extent, or based on making a projection based on what's happened in the past. He seems to have indicated that the numbers are going to look a lot worse than we had all expected. And I just wanted to know what your comments on that would be.
I think Dominic hinted in that speech, just talking of productivity, he was projecting weaker productivity in the economy, and we've downgraded our projections for productivity. That's why GDP growth, a bit further out in our projections, is a little bit south of where it was in August. And the reason we've done that is because our productivity performance over recent years has been disappointing. The past is the best indication we've got to the future. But as I said in the press conference yesterday, we would be delighted to be surprised to the upside on that. And final comment from me: the best way to forecast the future is to create it.
All right, thank you very much. It's a good note to end on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
We managed to get through one whole select committee hearing. Holy heck. How did you rate that experience?
Not as wide as I thought it would be.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not as rich, white, and privileged as I expected, which was fucking nice.
Yeah, it's a really, I'd say it's a really weird experience on that, because I was just like, I've not watched the Financial Expenditure Committee meeting because we've never actually had the opportunity on the show to cover one before. Next week's going to be very interesting because we've got Scrutiny Week, and I think we are going to have a look at an urgency special next week. I'll have to talk to Laura on that one, and Stacey, because I've just got to make sure I'm not booked in for coffee events. I don't think I've got one at this point, but you never know. Because I do take the money when I need it because I need to pay my bills.
In this economy, and this government.
Put it this way: this is the third Sunday in a row where I've had hardly any sleep for the last 24 hours because it's just like, paper run, then shower, drive off and do an event, finish that, come home, prepare for the show.
No, it's a lot in a row. And
it's going through there. Okay, let's get to the Disputes Tribunal.
I'm going to quickly grab a hoodie, though, because it's getting a little bit chilly now the sun's gone down.
Oh, fair enough. See, I'm baking in my room, so yeah.
Oh, it's just now that the sun's gone. It's actually not that cold.
Do you face south? No, does your window face east or face west?
That's a really good question. I've never actually checked. And now I want to know, and I'm going to open my compass.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because now I'm really
on the western side of the house, so I've got the hottest room on the third floor of my place.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, my window is east facing.
Oh, that probably explains why there's a hell of a lot. Whereas I've had to have my blind 2/3 down to cut the heat coming in.
Oh, see, because I live right in the middle of town too. All the buildings. We get no freaking sun. So and my house is also made out of walls that are this thick and have been filled with some shit.
Oh, and
there was it's a 100-year-old house. It's absolutely cooked. So the house gets really cold even if it's really warm outside.
Oh, that's awkward.
Yeah.
The houses, I've lived in some old houses, but I don't remember them getting that cold. But I do remember...
We are also in the side of a hill. So we're in a 100-year-old house in the side of a hill surrounded by giant fucking buildings.
Yeah.
You have to permanently have the lights on in this house, otherwise it's too dark.
Oh, God, that feels so good.
I
remember in the middle of the shows having to turn the lights on because I forgot to turn them off.
Yeah, honestly, Wellington, it's cooked.
Maybe we need to move to Newtown, where it's a bit sunnier. Okay, so let's kick off there now. For those who watched last week's show, we did start off with the Disputes Tribunal for the first speech. Now, because of the way how the last week go, let's kick off and we'll sit there and second off the show from Dr. Duncan Webb, and we'll get the speed back up because that's how we roll things around here at 1.5 times speed here on the Order Paper Podcast.
Will support this bill, but in many ways, there's a couple of funny things about it. In many ways, it's a missed opportunity. Raising the jurisdiction certainly provides access to justice, or fills what the regulatory impact statement calls the justice gap, whereby going to the district court, where lawyers are pretty not essential, but pretty handy, the costs of that are difficult to meet, whereas in the disputes tribunal, lawyers in fact aren't allowed, except in very limited circumstances, and so that will increase access to justice in some ways. However, the difficulties once we get to $60,000 with the disputes tribunal jurisdiction are its high degree of informality. For example, there is no requirement that a person who is essentially a judge, making a order in respect of that amount, has legal qualifications. Whilst most, if not all, appointments are in fact legally qualified, it may well be time to reflect that in the legislation. And in fact, the legislation itself does not require a disputes tribunal referee to decide a case according to the law. A disputes tribunal referee can decide a case in accordance with equity and fairness, but with regard to the law. So it's a pretty interesting situation where you can be in a contractual dispute with, say, your builder or whatever, for $60,000, and the disputes tribunal referee says, I've looked at the law and I've had a good regard to it, but I don't agree with it, so you lose. Now that's a matter of concern, but you don't have a right of appeal. Only for essentially a breach of natural justice, a failure in the procedure itself, would you get a right of appeal. So these are all things which there's an opportunity to tidy up. Rights of appeal, qualifications of dispute tribunal referees, and the need at this level to decide cases on the basis of the law and not well-meaning reckons. Although, to be fair, I'm pretty sure dispute tribunal referees do try to apply the law wherever they can. The other thing that could be tidied up here is the jurisdiction of the dispute tribunal itself in terms of the subject matter. It's got a relatively narrow jurisdiction in respect of contractual disputes and some tort disputes. It can consider car crashes, basic negligence, but it can't consider economic torts or torts of, for example, defamation or nuisance. It can't consider a civil trespass or questions of title to land or rights over land. Can't consider any questions of equity or trusts. All of those things are things that can crop up just as easily, and people have just as much access to justice issues there as anywhere else. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have a good look at this when we come to Select Committee, which I'm sure we're excited about as well. And the other thing is this, there's actually a really strange thing here. The Minister in this bill has imposed, or intends to impose, a $468 filing fee for the claim over $30,000, I think it is. You know what? You can file a claim for up to $350,000 in the district court for $260. So there's a real mismatch when you can go to the district court for $260, but the disputes tribunal, which doesn't apply the law and doesn't have a judge, is $468 as well. Now, the other point here is this. In the district court and every other court, if you can't afford the filing fee, you can apply for a waiver. But in the disputes tribunal, you can't. So if you're going to put up a barrier of $468, you need to be able to have a hardship waiver as well, because there'll be plenty of people who don't have $500 to front up with at the disputes tribunal. So the committee has a lot of work to do.
Yeah, that is actually a pretty good point there.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. That's
yeah, I know about the disputes tribunal, but it's like basically like the fee, it's like $45 and then $90 were the ones I knew, which were the lower end of the scale. Because it's 35 for like the first 1,000, and then from 1,000 up to 5 or 10 or something, it's $90. Yeah, it's but no, it's interesting, that you can have a hardship fee waiver in the district court, and I also know you can have that in the High Court, because there are some situations where you can't take an issue to the district court, such as even to do with MSD. If you need to take something very seriously, you've got to go. You've got to leapfrog to the High Court, and I've heard there are some High Court judges who, at least thank goodness, take sympathy on the win sort of stuff, because some of the stuff that ends up in the High Court shouldn't actually end up in the High Court. But we know what MSD are like. Act now, think later. Wait till when shit blows up beyond a reasonable point.
Yeah, fuck. And that's what I find annoying, because it's like MSD, like if you make one tiny little mistake, they're on your ass, they're cutting your shit, you've got to...
Oh, you don't even have to make the mistake.
Well, actually, yeah, exactly. You don't even have to make the mistake.
You've just got to be accused of the mistake. Punishment brick walls coming down. But if they make a mistake in the other direction...
Oh, yeah, now you've got to fucking jump through hoops still to fix their mistake.
Yeah, I saw one on the Wins group actually today about her child support payments from her ex had been double reported.
Oh, so they think that she's gotten double the pay.
Yeah, so she's reported a payment, and
Yeah,
IRD's reported the payment, and they've doubled the payment together, and they've put the payment through separately, not put it through together. And yeah, it's
So now they're trying to be like, you had too much
we at
money.
MSD are right, you are wrong.
Yeah, they always fucking think they're right.
Yeah, and it's like something I've said. Like I've had one in a situation where you've broken the law, and you're telling me I'm wrong.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I remember sitting there saying, so you're allowed to break the law? Sweet. I'm garnishing 100% of your wages because you have given permission for me to break the law.
Yeah.
You know? Oh, no. I go, yeah. You know, it's one law for all, not one law for beneficiaries and another law of sovereign immunity for case managers.
Oh, nah, yeah, it's so fucked. I mean, I hate when they do that shit.
Because all they do is make problems. But, you know, I mean, that's wins for you. You know, when did they actually help people?
I mean, no, to be fair, they do help because they help give me money so that I can pay my rent.
Yeah.
But they make being poor feel like something that you should be punished for actively, which I don't like.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that we live in a country that has this because holy shit, could you imagine living in a country without it?
Oh,
because I couldn't.
We would have, say, the terrace and Lincoln Key and Willis Street filled with homeless people. Frank Kitts Park will be, Nicola Willisville, named after Hooverville. You know? I mean, this is, the botanical gardens will be filled with tents.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to Lawrence Unan and hear what he's got to say on the bill.
And the Green Party will also support this bill as well. In terms of the context, I think the Honourable Paul Goldsmith and also the Honourable Dr. Duncan Webb has already mentioned it in terms of the fact that this is increasing, predominantly it is to increase the financial jurisdiction of the dispute tribunal from 30,000 to 60,000. And this is something that we have seen increase a number of times over the years, noting that, for example, in 2009, the limit was only 7,500 at that stage. But like the bill suggests, and like the intention of the bill, yes, I think there is the possibility of creating a relief or some sort of relief in the district court system by having some of that going to the district tribunal. And in many ways, this will allow for more accessibility and also faster processing time in terms of the court system. However, there are a couple of concerns, and I think the previous speaker has laid some of them out. And number one being that you will have to represent yourself. Once we're getting up to a certain level of threshold, there's also greater risk of that. There are also fewer legal protection for claimants. There are no judges, and also, like what we heard before, that there is no waiver being applied to now the new administrative fee, essentially, of $468. However, in saying that, people will still have the flexibility of whether to take their case to the district tribunal or the district court. But considering there isn't a waiver, there is possibly the greater discussion of what then would people do, knowing that one is more expensive than the other and one doesn't have a waiver. Will it be, we will actually see the manifestation of the intended purpose of this particular bill. And that is something that we're looking forward to teasing out during the select committee stage. But overall, it does offer a greater flexibility. Some of the other things that are also would be interesting to hear during the select committee process is that simply we don't have the data right now of the number of civil claims that is between $30,000 and $100,000 at all, and they're not currently captured in the legal system. So we also don't really know what is the maximum intent and the maximum benefit that we will see with this particular bill. But Mr. Speaker, overall, although the Green Party supports the intention of this bill and would like to see that the purpose of this bill being that it does allow for some of that faster processing time and relieve some of the pressure that we have on our district court system. But fundamentally, Mr. Speaker, we are seeing that our court systems are systemically underfunded in this environment, and something like this mainly pushing a certain set of the bill around within that ecosystem, or within that greater ecosystem of the court system. So, Mr. Speaker, although this bill is good, we would like to see there being greater support to the court system across the board. And although there are other bills that's currently in the House around increasing, for example, the number of district court judges, but there's nothing that's concretely around increasing the funding to the staffing. We haven't had tangible solutions in terms of some of the outdated and archaic filing system and IT system, which is currently in the works, and also some of the issues that we're seeing with district courts, and also in terms of building and infrastructure of district court in general, particularly district courts and court system in the rural and regional system. So overall, Mr. Speaker, the Green Party is supportive of this bill. We are interested to hear more from the public during the select committee stage, particularly around some of the instances and some of the cases on the number of the cases between 30,000 and 100,000.
Okay, that's actually interesting about the, what's it called? We don't have the stats on the number of cases between 30 and 100 grand.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, which that would actually be quite a useful figure of actually, what sort of cases that could be in disputes tribunal territory that isn't, such as like when someone sits there and screws up with a Tesla.
Or did the Tesla screw up? Did the person do it, or was it the Tesla?
Oh, yeah, who knows? But it's it's definitely something that what are we trying to work? What will it solve? Will it solve what it intends to solve? That sort of thing. Now, I think we're going to be very quick through the next two.
Sweet.
Because I don't like the look of this, but I feel like Todd Stevenson is literally seat warming here.
Yeah.
On the Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill, I want to thank Minister Goldsmith for bringing this bill forward. I know he and Minister McKee, the Minister for Courts, do share a desire to speed up our justice system, and that is something that they are absolutely focused on. This is a very important but small amendment, upping the amount that the Disputes Tribunal can look at, adding this extra tier or basically increasing it up to 60,000, and then adding this filing tier. So this will be make a material difference for people wanting to use this avenue to get disputes resolved. We think it's a very, very important bill, but it will actually do something practical for people out there. So I will be commending it to the House on behalf of ACT, and I again look forward to it coming to the Justice Select Committee. We're really, really looking forward to getting as many bills as possible before the Justice Select Committee. I think we've picked up the second one today, so I will be commending this to the House. Thank you.
And as you can see there, why I call it a seat warmer speech.
Yeah, I was going to say that was very much just like, felt like he was just fluffing.
It's really weird because I wouldn't normally sit there and say that about him.
I don't know most of these people by their careers. I'm just calling it how I see it.
For Rajan, who actually puts in there, where doesn't Todd Stevenson seat warming go? He actually, I would rate as probably the most forward-thinking ACT MP out there, and you will probably notice that across many of the people who actively watch Parliament TV or sit on the progressive side speak positively of him in general compared to other ACT MPs.
Is that because the bar is in hell? Or is it because he's actually good? Like I'm kind of.
No, he actually, like in the select committee, he's actually a lot more decent than say on the Multi Wards referendum bill. Most of the national MPs were trying to basically do patsy, gotcha questioning, whereas Todd Stevenson just wanted to find out the facts.
I mean, respect. I can respect that.
Yeah. He can't. Yeah, it's an interesting approach. Like, put it this way, the word could be said there. He is quite left for ACT.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, I think there's also his background. Like, he comes from a pharmaceutical background, but he comes across a lot more progressive than other ACT people on things. But I mean, he's also gay. He's married to a man. He's probably watched a lot of things that have affected the gay community.
Oh yeah, I mean.
So and that
It's interesting that we have queers in the ACT Party. I didn't know this. This is brand new information to me. It's surprising.
Yeah, yes, even if it is only one. But considering in 2020, David Seymour considered diversity was having a vegetarian.
Oh god, they got a vegetarian and a homo. I love it.
Yeah, but we don't know. Don't know who the vegetarian is. That's the part I don't know. And for the question that's come up there,
car?
This is why I brought up there. What's that T-shirt, Sam?
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
Nicky No Boats T-shirt.
The BHN, Nicky No Boats, but drawn by our own Emily from the Friday show.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what Casey Costello.
Again, to take a call for the Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill, which New Zealand First will be proudly supporting. It aligns to New Zealand First's commitment to a fairer New Zealand where justice is accessible to all and that it works efficiently to the benefit of every citizen. And I think expanding the threshold ensures that we have the ability to close that gap that the Minister spoke of earlier and ensure that there is a process by which we can expand access to justice, which is a critical component, which I think is where this gap sits. It is about delivering some cost-effective dispute resolution, enabling some of those barriers to taking these claims through. There is also the knock-on effect that it does empower our small businesses and our communities to be a bit more brave, to be a bit more, bit less risk-averse and challenge things a bit more. It is about future-proofing this process and ensuring that we have recognition that there is a changing dynamic around the values of some of these disputes, and we want to ensure that people aren't getting away with things because it becomes too costly or too complex to seek the resolution that is appropriate. So on that basis, Mr Speaker, New Zealand First will proudly commend this bill to the House.
A bit more of a speech, but it feels very seat-warmerish.
Yeah, it did feel, but it's just filler. It just feels like filler.
It feels like, yeah, filler speech, yeah.
Yeah, filler episode.
Let's see what James Meagher's got to say. I think we can guess what this is going to talk about.
Secondary school like Timaru Boys High School, which had a strong focus on numeracy and maths, because by my count, this is the 27th bill the Justice Committee will receive this term and consider, and it's another...
Sorry, let's go back.
Sorry, just fucking math. Really?
To the House.
James Meagher. Oh, Mr Speaker, I thank my lucky stars that I went to a strong secondary school like Timaru Boys High School, which had a strong focus on numeracy and maths, because by my count, this is the 27th bill that the Justice Committee will receive.
27 bills to the Justice Committee since he's been chair.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Receive this term and consider, and it's another absolute masterclass from Minister Paul Goldsmith in getting the simple changes that the country needs in order to get us back on track. Look, Mr Speaker, there's a few things I'd like to raise in Select Committee that members have raised, one of which is around the filing fees. Of course, there is a filing fee of $468 proposed, and that is higher than the fee in the District Court, but then, of course, you've got half-day hearings of $1,200 and judicial settlement conferences of $1,200 in the District Court. So there are those other costs to consider as well when you're going through that process. But they are the things that we can discuss in the Select Committee, and with that, I look forward to it traversing its way to us very, very shortly. Very good.
Okay. I was not... he's missing a bit of his speech. He normally says, when you go and put in your submissions, can you please sit there and make them individualised? Please put them on the parliamentary website. Please.
Oh, okay. Does he have a bit of a spiel that he says? Okay. Damn. Must be because I'm here and you said it.
Okay. Now, please be aware, we'll be sitting in silence for a little while. The next speech is quite long.
As a Labour member, I am concerned, and I have been for a long time, about the fact that people with these smaller amounts of money, and it is a lot of money to a lot of people, just simply have not had mechanisms that are affordable. So I'm extremely pleased to see this step in the right direction. I note that Dr. Duncan Webb makes some interesting points about the gaps that remain, and I also noted that Paul Goldsmith seemed willing to consider those, and I hope that the committee will look at them. The ones that I see, one is actually defamation. Defamation is a really undercooked tort in this country. There's a lot of people suffering a lot of damage on social media, and I wonder whether there is a little bit of an opportunity there to build that in. I do take note that the people that sit on this tribunal aren't necessarily lawyers, and that's sometimes a really good thing, to have a bit of a mix going on of people, because they come with a lot of acumen out of a more pragmatic approach sometimes. So I don't actually have a problem with that, and I can see that that means that it might limit the kinds of things that you have in the Disputes Tribunal, because some are probably more legalistic than others, some quite formulaic, but actually defamation is one that is quite formulaic. It is a test that should be being applied more regularly than it is, and people should be more careful about the damage they do through the statements they make. I am interested too in the issue of the gap that's emerged, where people have been compromising their claims, and I think that's very real. I think there are a lot of examples where people have compromised their claim just to get into the service and get away from what is actually an overwhelming system. We have a lot of work to do with regard to that. And I'm also concerned beyond this bill, but I think it is relevant to it, in situations where people actually just owe debt. Those situations where there is no dispute in play, but people are owed debt, I don't think they're working particularly well either. It costs a lot of money to go into a situation where you get a statutory demand and then you've got to take an action, often in the High Court. The fees are actually exorbitant for that. So I think there may be some work that could be done in terms of also looking at an expansion in that area. So I commend the work that's been done in looking at this. This matters incredibly to New Zealanders. This will affect our small businesses. It will be something that will be incredibly important to a lot of individuals. And those are the people that in this Parliament we should be looking after. And we often bring mechanisms into play which might be well-meaning, but they are just too expensive for people to use in those situations. So the Disputes Tribunal has worked well. I'm always concerned about those kinds of mechanisms like inquisitorial systems because they have got some disadvantages as well. They can be a bit erratic in terms of the justice they mete out, but life is full of that sort of thing, and we've got to kind of strike a balance here. So I do see a lot of advantage in a system which doesn't involve lawyers at this kind of bar, and the $60,000 amount seems about right. I hope that the committee, of course, will also look at the amount, and the submitters, I think, would be welcome to focus on things like whether, in fact, that is the right amount, whether it should be 60, whether it should be 70, whether it should be $100,000. $100,000 is a lot of money. I probably have concerns about going quite that high up, but it does seem that that would be a situation where submissions would be very helpful from real live New Zealanders who have suffered harm under a system that has not necessarily catered for them as well as it should. I commend this bill to the House.
That's interesting, the part being mentioned about debt collection and debt enforcement of collection for debt.
True, yeah. No,
Yeah,
actually, good point.
Yeah, because I took a former business partner to the Disputes Tribunal over that. And yeah, the most satisfying thing was going through there and having the attachment order put against his benefit as a last hurrah. He never expected that to happen, that suddenly out of the blue, $30 a week was getting taken out of his benefit. And
Yeah, I mean,
suddenly,
that's rare to happen.
yeah, but I mean, it took me about over a year to go through the whole process. And
Oh, is
literally,
that it? Only a year? To be fair, I have friends who've been trying to chase people up for I think I have a friend who's been trying to chase someone up over an issue with like a car, basically, that's, been going for at least 5 years now.
yeah, no, this one was there, but I mean, it gave him about 6 months to give a chance, but he just kept ballsing it up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing, and like I got told, I was the first person who dragged him through the legal ringer.
Sounds like you needed it, though.
Yeah, I do believe doing that, but yeah, he still tries to think he can be buddy with me now, and it's like, I want nothing to do with you. Like, he even quite it's like, in 2019, it's like, hey, look, I voted for you. You should be proud of me. It's like, so what?
Okay, cool story, bro.
Yeah. It's like, I took you to do
me
a
over.
vote in 2016 because you turned 18 after the enrollment date closed off. So your first time voting, I dragged you to the polling booth. Now, I think this is a seat warmer speech.
For this, the second bill that the Justice Select Committee is receiving this evening. Today is the Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill. And essentially, Mr Speaker, as we've heard so far, that there's a justice gap that this bill will indeed fill. So I would like to say, let's fill that justice gap. Let's get this bill rolling. And with that, I commend the bill to the House.
As you would agree with my word, seat warmer speech?
Yeah, I was wondering if that's what that rah was about too, because it always felt like they were just like, oh, is that it? You just saying nothing.
Okay, let's see what Tracy McCullen's got to say.
Contribution on this Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill, and as several people have noted, Labor obviously will be supporting this bill. It's a sensible, small piece of potential legislation that makes a difference to real people who are going through a disputes process. Mr Speaker, the Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill, as has been said, simply raises the cap from $30,000 to $60,000 on the awards that the Disputes Tribunal can make. And as has also been said, it's a really important way, therefore, to make that justice and that recompense accessible to people, because for a lot of people, their only experience of the justice system is through a disputes process, and for people to have faith in the system as a whole, they want to be able to seek that redress in a way that makes sense and that is efficient, cost effective, and doesn't do more harm than good, so to speak. So the at the moment, the fee of $59, as I said, therefore does make it accessible. And I think many of us in this House possibly have experience of going through a disputes tribunal, or know of people that if something has happened, whether it be the tenancy tribunal for some people, but the disputes tribunal in this case, where people have sought to get what's owing to them, or sought to right a wrong that has happened. And it's incredibly stressful, and it's something that you have to do yourself, and it's something that you have to take the lead on. There's a lot of unfamiliar language, there's a lot of unfamiliar process. So anything we can do to make that better is good. So the bill will mean that losing parties in the tribunal will also have to pay the cost of that filing back fee to the applicant. And I note that when the the claim is between 30 and 60,000, that fee is significantly higher. I suppose with an eye to preventing frivolous claims, so that people will think twice about pursuing claims that are frivolous, and particularly when you can imagine when there's a power imbalance, and it may just be, they may think it's worth their while to do so, but if that had to be paid for them, if they were to lose, then that kind of evens up that process a little bit. It's not a perfect bill insofar as, I think someone said earlier on, it's a little bit of a missed opportunity perhaps to have done a couple of things differently. There are a number of issues with the bill, but nothing that couldn't be sorted out through the select committee process, and I'm sure it will be there. If I remember correctly, I think the Honourable Dr. Duncan Webb said earlier about there not being the right of appeal, which obviously is an important part of any process and should be no less important in this process. And it doesn't increase the cap to the level that had been suggested by that Rules Committee recommendation, which of course is the impetus for this and where it comes from. But as Helen White has just talked about, at what point, where is the happy balance between that cap being too high and not high enough? So all things that can be discussed during the Select Committee process, and hopefully there will be some submissions, and hopefully we will have some scenarios and some stories to sort of flesh out some of the pragmatics around this bill. There is a need to balance that benefits of what is a quick, cheap and cheerful sort of informal justice process with something that could be a little bit more robust, and the ability to correct error, as I said, with a potential of an appeal rights process through the courts. And I think that that will be quite interesting. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, the bill in itself is simple. It stems from some recommendations, and so has already come from a relatively good place in terms of process. So Labor commends this bill to the House, and we look forward to the Justice Committee doing its thing and reporting back in due course.
I think Tracy may have slightly misrepresented there. You can appeal, but it does cost. Now, if you appeal within the tribunal, it's free of charge. But if you appeal outside the tribunal to the district court, that's when there is a substantial fee increase.
Which kind of makes sense, to be fair.
Yeah, so I think that might be, but it is known as you cannot, if the district court judge agrees in the application with the tribunal referee, you're kind of stuck with the decision. Because I did hear there was this one professional landlord who pretty much takes every single tenant they had to the tribunal, often would go to the district court section if she didn't get away.
Right.
Yeah, so there are some people out there who are professionals in the disputes tribunal. Now, let's see what Cameron Brewer's got to say, because I think it's a seat warmer speech.
Fucking hell.
On the disputes tribunal amendment bill, the 27th bill, that will go to the Justice Committee. 27 isn't so good in Hollywood, or if you're a pop star, but it will be a lucky it will be a lucky number here. And as we know, Mr. Speaker, at present people can pursue disputes about claims of up to 30,000 in the tribunal. And this bill, as others have canvassed, would amend the Act to increase that amount to 60,000. So I look forward to the submissions. I look forward to the discussions. I commend this bill to the House.
Okay, so you love the term seat warmer speech,
but also just weirdly dark reference. Fucking weird.
But that's Cameron Brewer for you. My grandma met him probably about 15 years ago through the Shepherds, when the Shepherds were still alive. Shepherds were ex-education colleagues of grandma's. Well, actually, probably when both my grandparents were alive, considering when this strong part of the relationship was, both my grandparents were alive. And yeah, I remember when Grandma sat there and said, I know that name who got elected, and I think that she said something Harbour, and I go, oh, Upper Harbour. It's like, yeah, Cameron Brewer, I go, he would completely say those words. That is 100% in line with what Cameron Brewer would say.
So funny, so random. I just wasn't expecting it. It was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so he was the one who sat there and said it was about a white pale male replaced the most ethnic.
Oh, okay, character.
Yeah, that was what Grandma's reference was.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's but yes, another Sikh woman. Now let's get to the vote.
The question is, the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill, first reading.
The question is that the Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill be considered by the Justice Committee. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Call on government order of the day.
Gee, that was a quick vote. No party vote. Nothing needed to be called for.
Aye, all good.
Yeah, and no
Who's on board?
Sending it to Select Committee. Considering I do remember there was one particular bill, the banning of the gay conversion therapy bill, National objected it being sent to Select Committee. Oh, I think that was when they were being whipped by Judith Collins.
Right.
So, you know how they all voted for it at the first reading, and it was also the one where Trevor Mallard, before he went to Progress, was asking if there was going to be a personal vote called for, because he said this type of legislation personally gets it, and it's like, no. Yeah. Okay, so we've got 25 minutes left. So let's kick off with the great part of Julian Genta's Members' Bill, my local MP.
Get it.
How do I get that in there nicely? That's what I want. Let's kick it off.
To the contrary, no. The motion is agreed. The bill is set down for third reading next sitting day. I call on members' order of the day number 3.
Income Tax, Clean Transport FBT Exclusion Amendment Bill, first reading.
Honourable Julian Genta.
I move that the Income Tax, Clean Transport FBT Exclusion Amendment Bill now be read for the first time. I nominate the Finance and Expenditure Committee to consider the bill.
The Honourable Julian Genta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā koutou e te whare. Right now, on the other side of the world, the COP, I'm not sure which number it is, climate conference is happening, 29. And at the same time, I've just read a headline that says that scientists have determined that the 1.5 degrees of warming that was agreed to in Paris at COP21 is already unattainable. So it's been about 9 years, and we haven't seen the action that we needed in order to radically reduce carbon emissions to keep global heating below 1.5 degrees above industrial levels. Of course, the Paris Agreement was one that the National Party signed Aotearoa New Zealand up to, and have repeatedly asserted that they were committed to achieving those targets. Now, one of the things that we need to do, one very small thing, it might seem, in this bill would help contribute to is increasing the demand for electric vehicles. And so I put this bill in the ballot. Mr. Speaker, this is the first members' bill in 13 years of being in this House of Parliament that I have the pleasure of speaking to. I was quite lucky 6 years in to have a members' bill drawn, but then I was a minister by the time it got to first reading, so I had to pass it on to a colleague. And then it took another 6 years for this bill to be drawn. So it's my first time speaking to a members' bill, and it was one that I put in the ballot because I thought it might get the support of parties in the current government. And the reason I thought it might get support is because it's literally a policy that National had in their manifesto in 2020. Not so long ago. So what this bill does is it creates a temporary exemption for fringe benefit tax on electric vehicles. And the rationale for this is that the majority of vehicles purchased in New Zealand are purchased by businesses, that employers who have large fleets or provide their employees with vehicles could be incentivized quite easily to purchase electric vehicles if we created a temporary exemption of fringe benefit tax. And of course, we've seen other exemptions in fringe benefit tax. There's an exemption for employer-provided car parks. Employer-provided car parks generate additional traffic trips. They have a whole host of unintended negative consequences, and yet they're exempt from fringe benefit tax. Because of the distortion that's created by that exemption, we've seen more exemptions put in, which is helpful because the work trip, commute to work trip is one of the biggest drivers of the morning and afternoon peak in traffic. And if we have different incentives, if employers can provide different incentives, you can get shifts in behavior. So we saw an exemption brought in last term that the Green Party had campaigned on, which was an exemption for public transport passes. And then at the very last minute, an amendment that I proposed to exempt bikes and electric bikes. And that is actually creating an incentive and a kind of industry support for services to employers like managing fleets of electric bikes. It's enabling people to access clean transportation. So that's why this bill was put in place. And I know it seems really boring and technical. I feel that when I'm giving the speech. It's hard to be really passionate about fringe benefit tax, isn't it? But here we are. So what happened was the the government says they're committed to the Paris targets. They're committed to reducing emissions. Transport is one of the largest sources of our carbon emissions. The vast majority of our carbon emissions from transport are from private vehicles. And so if we're going to have any hope of decarbonizing, and there's no plan to shift away from very high reliance on private vehicles from the current government. Indeed, if anything, there's policies that are all about encouraging reliance on private vehicles and making it harder for people to use public transport. So if we're going to reduce emissions, which the government says they want to do, we need more electric vehicles. And I just want to quote some of the supporters of this bill, who I thought members opposite might be interested to hear. The Motor Industry Association, MIA, had provided this quote of support. The MIA's support for this bill goes beyond the associated financial incentives. Our immediate concern is consumers' low uptake and continued hesitation in transitioning towards EVs. The supply of suitable vehicles is no longer a barrier to meeting carbon reduction targets. Consumer demand is. Achievement of future decarbonization goals now hinges upon consumer demand. Continued consumer hesitation will directly impact carbon targets and our ability to achieve them. So this bill is a targeted strategic step towards strengthening demand for zero-emissions vehicles, which is essential for positioning New Zealand to meet its environmental commitments. It's been supported by a wide variety of automotive industry representatives, the AA. In fact, when Simon Bridges was Transport Minister, if anyone remembers that, he's currently the chair of NZTA, he had an electric vehicle advisory group who pushed for this policy. That was what they were campaigning on. And that's why National then campaigned on it in 2020, but sadly it dropped from their manifesto. However, it is not too late. It is not too late. And I ask all members here tonight to consider voting for this bill, simply to send it to Select Committee where it could be considered further, where we could hear from the public, from experts, and get advice from officials. Of course, we have to hear from more than just IRD officials, because IRD officials, we all know, just love a very simple tax system, and they're not a huge fan of exemptions. However, we are policymakers, and we're here to get outcomes for New Zealanders. And the OECD has repeatedly told New Zealand we're not using our tax system to get the environmental outcomes we want enough. And this would be a simple way to get the outcomes we want. Now, this is not going to be very visible on television, unfortunately, but I did print a graph to show what had happened with electric vehicle registrations in Aotearoa in 2024 after the clean car discount was cancelled. And there is a whole range of industry supporters, like people who provide the charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. They're saying, and a number of them I know will have emailed members in the last week or so, they are saying that we need policy support from central government to increase the demand for electric vehicles. If we want the charging infrastructure, if we want the renewable generation, the single key driver of that is demand. How do we create the demand? We incentivize electric vehicles. And I accept the members opposite, despite the success of the policies, we're not in agreement with carrying on with the clean car discount. Now, the advantage of the clean car discount was that it kept the incentives within the market of new vehicles coming to New Zealand. And it meant that everybody who was bringing a new car into New Zealand, whether it was a highly polluting vehicle or an EV, somehow they were playing a role in helping us reduce our emissions from those private vehicles. So they've chosen to end that policy. However, there's nothing in its place. If anything, the road user charges for battery electric vehicles are penalizing electric vehicles now, because if someone has a hybrid vehicle, they pay half the cost per kilometer as a battery electric vehicle would, even though it's comparable damage to the road. So it is time. We need a solution, and that's why I put this very constructive bill in the ballot, because I thought potentially government members, whatever party they might be in, might see the attractiveness of a bill that takes a tax off businesses and supports private cars. Some people are heckling me right now, as usual, and I would love to respond to every heckle. And let me say, why is it that you're okay with tax breaks that don't reduce emissions, but you're not okay with tax breaks that do reduce emissions? That's my question for members opposite. It's like, the whole point of the tax break is to get an outcome we want. Do we want more people who own property to keep buying up properties? No. Do we want to reduce emissions and incentivize the electric vehicle market and the electric vehicle charging infrastructure and the generation of renewable electricity? Yes, we should all want that. And I would hope that all members, whether they're in the government or not, will consider voting for this bill so we can take it to Select Committee and potentially find a solution we can all agree with.
That sounds very Julie and Magenta.
Yeah, honestly, she was on fire. Rap bars.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I definitely know there's a group of people out there who just think when they hear Julie and Magenta, they think Looney, who has no clue what they're talking about. Even though she actually is quite a smart, intelligent person, and proves it if you actually open your ears and listen.
I mean, to be fair, people don't like her because she was a woman who got aggressive, and people hate aggressive women.
Oh, yes, but they don't like it because she sat there and rode a bike to hospital to deliver her first baby.
Oh, how dare she get in someone's face and yell at them?
You know, or you sit down and you have Laura at Four Season Flowers, who sits there and abuses anyone who turns up on a bike. Yeah. And if she wants to sue me, go ahead, you know, and we can talk about the time when you did invite me to your store and you locked the doors and pretend no one was there.
Fucking psycho.
Oh, yes. Okay, let's see what Stuart Smith has to sit there and say in National's reply.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a great pleasure to speak on the Income Tax Clean Transport FBT Exclusion Amendment Bill. And I'd have to say, I'm used to listening to Dr. Deborah Russell, who's very keen on, very knowledgeable on tax actually, and very enthusiastic about it, and she's a great asset to the Finance and Expenditure Committee when it comes to tax. I've now found out another member on the opposition who speaks enthusiastically about tax. So I've learned something tonight I didn't know about the Honourable Julian Genta. But Mr. Speaker, I will put the member out of her misery and say that we're actually not going to support this bill. But it is a great thrill to have a bill drawn out of the ballot, and well done. 13 years, and this is your first opportunity to speak to one. But at least you got your other one through. Oh, did it go through? Oh, that's a shame. But anyway, it is a great thrill to get a bill out and get it to the floor and to speak to it. But ultimately, you have to have a bill that's going to be supported. And the reason, Mr. Speaker, that we don't support it is actually we don't think it's necessary to have a fringe benefit tax to incentivise the uptake of electric vehicles. Mr. Speaker, we're in a period where we're in change and where electric vehicles may well overtake the internal combustion engine in the long run. And we've been in these sorts of periods before. I take you back, Mr. Speaker, not that you will remember it, of course, but the great horse manure crisis of 1894. This was a big thing around the world. Horse manure was making cities uninhabitable because of the transport of the day was, of course, the horse. Cars did exist just after that period in particular, but they were not being taken up at a fast enough rate to overtake the horses. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I know you'll be interested in this. The issue was all of the manure in the street, how do they clean it up? Well, of course, they had to have horses to clean it up, and of course, that caused more manure. So it didn't really solve the problem. And there was a story in the Times about it in 1894. In fact, there was a bit of an urban legend. It said in the Times, allegedly, in 50 years, every street in London will be buried under 9 feet of manure, end quote. That actually was a myth. That's not what it said. In fact, in 1894, they were complaining about dust, mud, rather than manure and dead horses in the street. So where am I going with this? Well, actually, in 1908, Mr. Speaker, you'll be pleased to know, Henry Ford produced the first Model T that rolled off the production line where they had mass production, and he made vehicles affordable for the common person to buy. And because there were a lot of cars around, in fact, there were electric lead-acid battery cars at that time. But anyway, the internal combustion engine won the day, and it's still the primary means of road transport today. Of course, buses and electric trams also dealt with the horse manure issue. But people took up those vehicles because they made a decision that that technology was better than the existing technology. They weren't subsidised, they weren't taxed, and had tax incentives, either a tax break or a tax on horses. It ended up, people made a technology decision. Now, Mr. Speaker, I give this speech as a person who owns an EV. And I own an EV that never got a subsidy, and I own that EV, well, actually my wife does, and because we like that technology. It's a technology that we like, and it's a far better drive than an internal combustion engine. But unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, we live in the rural, provincial New Zealand, and an EV is not that practical for long distances, and we do a lot of long distances, so we have a diesel vehicle. But we didn't buy it to save emissions, we bought it because of the technology. And actually, I think we know what's happening in the world at the moment. I think there's going to be a lot more Chinese EVs that are very cheap and are hitting Europe about now, and we will get them at some point anyway, and they will be more than cost competitive, so we don't need a fringe benefit tax for EV uptake. What we do need is what we are doing, and that is building charging stations to ensure that people don't have range anxiety. And I know, unless you have an EV, you don't know what range anxiety is. Because believe me, Mr. Speaker, you don't want to go below 20% left on your battery. That can run down very quickly. And I can tell you, driving through the Mackenzie country in an EV and a nor'wester and watching the battery just drain away, it's not a very, and it's a long way to the next charging station. It's not a very nice experience. But that aside, the member spoke a lot about emissions. But the reality is, and there's research to show this, you have to drive a EV for over 100,000 miles, not kilometres, miles, until you you get the benefit of having that in terms of emissions of having an EV rather than an internal combustion engine vehicle, because of all the mining that's required for the materials to go into an EV. There's a lot of emissions that go into that, the manufacture of that vehicle. That's not a disputable fact. Mr. Speaker, I note in this the fringe benefit tax, also part of this bill, is to actually deem all double cab utes as cars. And I'll tell you why that is. That is because that will then make them not able to receive the fringe benefit tax. Utes, I know a former Prime Minister who has made her name helping Kamala Harris with her
her election campaign, which didn't go that well actually. But anyway, she talked about utes and being an illegitimate ute, and that people were driving them around. Well, illegitimate utes cannot get fringe benefit tax. There are conditions on what can get a fringe benefit tax, and that is one, permanently displays a vehicle that displays on its exterior the employer's identification. So it must have that on it. It is not a car. It is not available for an employer's private use, except for private use that is travel to and from home that is necessary and a condition of their employment, or other travel in the course of their employment during which travel arises incidentally to the business use. So everyone who owns, if this were to pass, who owns a ute, a double cab ute for their business, like the tradies, the plumbers, the builders, all the electricians, they will not be able to get they will not be eligible for a fringe benefit tax exemption, and that is hitting the productive sector of New Zealand. It's outrageous, and that is why one of the main reasons why we will not be supporting this bill. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm with pleasure actually opposing this bill.
Fucking hell.
The double cab ute. I mean, you've got to sit there and prove, like, when you actually buy a business vehicle, it's not quite as simple as that. And if you're using it for business purposes, fringe benefit tax doesn't really come into the system until you start using it for personal.
Yeah, it's because he's
for employees who use it for personal use.
He's just dog whistling to all those idiots who think that the ute tax is attacking the hard-working people of New Zealand.
But you really need a double cab ute to park it on the terrace in Wellington.
Mate, can you even park on the terrace with a fucking ute? They're too wide. I had a Suzuki Swift and it got crashed into.
Oh, here, you've got the same type of engine that my car's got, because I've got a Suzuki ATV.
I had.
Yeah, I've got the so I've got the van version, but it's got a similar type of motor to the Swift.
I just found that whole thing ridiculous because first he's talking about fucking horse poop. Then he's like, honestly, what the fuck was that?
I don't know.
It's just a waste of taxpayers' money. How much money did we pay him to fucking say all that garbage, huh?
Yeah, well, yes, but hey, we at least have it documented on record.
Yeah, but also, what was the battery thing? He's like, oh, unless you've got an EV, you don't know what battery things is. As if people haven't had fucking anxiety about their phone running out of battery or their laptop running out of
what
battery.
do you call it, their car running out of petrol and the next petrol station selling petrol for $2.80 a litre, not $2.50 a litre.
What the fuck, Grandpa?
Oh, here's the great, as Stuart said, a tax expert, Dr. Deborah Russell.
The Labour Party will be supporting this bill. Now, ordinarily, we would not take the step of looking at FBT exemption and so on for a very specific period. It's a sort of a wrinkle in the Tax Act that we would not ordinarily support. But we did want to support this one, and the reason is quite straightforward. There are currently no incentives around the uptake of EVs in New Zealand. Nothing since the clean car discount was removed. We think that this measure would encourage businesses to use electric vehicles. And of course, once a business uses an electric vehicle and perhaps uses it for a few years and then it gets sold out into the second-hand fleet, it increases the supply of second-hand vehicles in the country in general. It would actually be a good measure in terms of trying to work hard on reducing our emissions. At present, there seem to be no measures being taken to reduce this country's emissions by the government, and this would go some way towards doing that. So it's a short-term incentive. I think it would be worth trying in the absence of any other measures designed to make it more financially viable for businesses to take up electric vehicles. So that would be quite a straightforward thing to do. Now, the bill achieves this by adding an exclusion to Section CX6 of the Income Tax Act. What that particular section does is it has, Section CX6 imposes fringe benefit tax on the private use of a vehicle which is supplied by an employer. But there are some exclusions. So when the vehicle is used for an emergency, when it's used for a work trip that lasts more than 24 hours and so on, there's various exclusions. It would simply add an exclusion if the vehicle was an EV. And that seems like a pretty straightforward way to do it. So that is why how a change could be achieved, and I think it is worth a try. I do want to just take up something which the previous speaker was talking about, and that is the other rule that is proposed in this bill around double cab utes. Now, at the moment, if you've got a car, a vehicle that is designed exclusively or mainly to carry up to 9 people, including the driver, that gets defined as a car. And cars get caught by the fringe benefit tax rules when they are supplied by an employer for an employee to use. Right, so that's fairly straightforward. But work-related vehicles fall out of the fringe benefit tax rules. And there's a little bit of an anomaly around double cab ute. So even when someone is using a double cab use pretty much for personal purposes, it does seem that in the ways that the law is applied, many people seem to think that because it's a double cab ute, then it is defined as a work-related vehicle and it falls outside of the FBT rules. So this would just be a matter of clarifying what actually ought to be the practice. But we know from evidence from Inland Revenue and from Inland Revenue officers up and down the country that there are some areas where double cab utes are treated as just being a work-related vehicle, when in actual fact they are functioning as a car. So this would just clarify the rules around that. And if a person is using their double cab ute for work-related purposes, and they're only using it for work-related purposes, there's no problem. It's when they use that vehicle as a car, for passenger transport, for personal passenger transport, that it becomes a different matter. So it would simply clarify the rules. If a business wants to use a double cab ute, go for it. That's absolutely fine. It's just a matter of where the benefit from that falls and whether it does form part of, I guess, an employee's remuneration. So it would simply clarify that. And I think it's a valuable measure in itself, just clarifying that aspect of the FBT rules. So having said all that, this bill, it's a shame to hear that it won't at least be supported to Select Committee, where we could have gone into some of the issues around fringe benefit tax. Fringe benefit tax does need reviewing. There are some anomalies in the law. It is a complicated piece of legislation which could do with a wee bit of tidying up. It's a shame that the government won't allow that to take place. But in the Labour Party, our position is very clearly, even though as a tax measure itself we might not support it, as a measure to reduce emissions we do, and for that reason we support this bill.
Thank you, Deborah, for sitting down there and putting better words than I could use on to show how broad Stuart Smith's speech was.
Yeah. She cooked.
God, she's been on fire tonight.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think Dave points out a good point, though, that, like, finding this easy because it's logical. It's almost like it's easy to make an argument if you're using facts and logic and a good, solid, just well-rounded argument.
Yeah, it's definitely going on. Let's see what ACT has got to say before we have to sit there and call it time for the show.
Oh, we have to end on ACT.
And having the opportunity to present to the House your case for why electric vehicles should be exempt from fringe benefit tax. And only temporarily, the member says, which doesn't add to the weight of evidence that she has presented. The evidence for the prosecution of this flawed case. Electric vehicles are so cheap and so plentiful that the government needs to subsidise them with tax breaks in order to make them more plentiful and more available. That doesn't stack up. Now, the honourable member, I understand, is a transport planner, and I've had lots of wonderful conversations where we agree about transport planning and urban planning, but this proposal is missing an economic support. Because when supply exceeds demand, that is evidence of customers expressing preference. It could also be evidence that suppliers have become so efficient at producing the goods at such a low price that essentially they've flooded the market, they've reached maximum capacity of what consumers of any product will absorb. Two things will happen in that case. Consumers might suddenly decide to switch preferences based on price, or it may very well be that the manufacturers of those products made a very poor choice in oversupplying the market, investing in plant and equipment that turned out not to be able to achieve its rate of return. The New Zealand taxpayer should not be helping companies who have malinvested or helping consumers who have adequate choice at very low cost. The previous government gave hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars to subsidise electric vehicles. They taxed tradies who needed to buy utes and vans, and large families who needed to buy larger vehicles, and they transferred that money to another...
I'd just like to remind you that tax was tax deductible.
...another group of consumers to subsidise the cost of their electric vehicles. That artificially stimulated demand, which didn't exist without government interference. Now, this coalition government, the ACT Party included, campaigned to get rid of the ute tax and restore fairness into the vehicle market and for tradies, farmers, big people who need big family cars, and we did that. We delivered that in the first 100 days. We got rid of the ute tax. Ute tax is no more. And now there's a surplus of electric vehicles, and it's almost like we didn't need the tax. We didn't need the subsidy. The market has provided. And that may be a surprise to the Green Party and members of the Labour Party apparently supporting us, that free markets will supply as much stuff as you want. But I just want to give you an example about what's changed in the EV market in the last few years. The Hertz rental company in the past week has written off $2 billion of the residual value of its EV rental fleet, because it turns out after 3 years they're worth next to nothing. Whereas a different type of a petrol or diesel vehicle with 100,000 k in 3 years on the clock still has a significant, maybe 40 or 50% of its residual value. EVs have next to nothing. There is nothing that the Greens, Labour and other socialist parties wouldn't subsidise in tax and get other people to pay for it. But we can't make consumers choose things that they don't want. We can't. You can't subsidise rubbish, failing media companies by taxing successful ones, like Google, and handing them other people's money. A famed Wellington economist, a gentleman called Dr. Eric Crampton, some of you might have read his writings, Dr. Eric Crampton from the New Zealand Initiative. He is an expert on so many topics. He's an expert on Wise's maps. He made the point recently on that wonderful social media channel X that, taken to the extreme, if you want to subsidise businesses that are failing, maybe we could tax Google Maps and give the money to Wise's maps, which sit dusty and unwanted in the service station. This bill is about as sensible as that. It won't work, but I want to offer hope for the member, Julie Magenta. Something that is so cheap that they've been given away at cost, the market has already solved the problem for consumers and businesses. ACT will not support it, I'm sorry.
Fucking, he can't call anyone dusty. That man cannot throw fucking rocks from glass houses. He's dusty.
Yeah.
Fucking Jesus, what was that? Atlas? That Atlas propaganda as well.
Yeah. Yes, but I've never sat there and I don't rate Simon Court in the same category as I rate Todd Stevenson.
I mean, I hope not, because the Todd guy sound kind of okay. That guy can absolutely just eat a dick. Straight up. It's fucking, what the hell was that? It's like, and also that Crompton guy mentioned, and the fucking New Zealand Initiative, which is just the New Zealand branch of Atlas. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I am sick of... and the worst thing is that's not the first time I've heard about Atlas showing up in other places today. I'm getting sick of all these fucking holes they're hiding in.
Oh, yes. Okay, so let's get to the fun part of the end of the show where we sit there and tell you what bills are coming up for submissions. So the Statutes Amendment Bill closes on the 4th of December, this Wednesday. The Child Protection Child Sex Offenders Government Agency Registration Amendment Bill closes this Friday on the 6th. The Oversight of the Aotearoa Tamariki Systems Legislation Amendment Bill closes on the 8th of December. The Responding to Abuse in Care Legislation Amendment Bill closes on the 11th of December. The Giving Evidence and Family Violence Amendment Bill closes on Thursday the 19th of December. I think that's the last sitting day of Parliament as well. The Policing Police Vetting Amendment Bill, Thursday the 19th of December. The Victims of Sexual Violence Strengthening Legal Protection Amendment Bill closes Thursday the 19th of December. The Mental Health Bill closes Friday the 20th of December. These are your bills you've got to do before Christmas. And every Christmas and New Year, you get out your treaty, your Principles Treaty of Waitangi Bill, and you write your submission on that. And then when you finish that, you sit down there and do the Oranga Tamariki Response to Serious Youth Offending Amendment Bill, which is the one about bringing back physical force.
Right. What?
Oh, yes. We covered that last week's show.
Oh, okay, I missed that. I'm going to have to fucking go and look at that. Jesus Christ.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, so those are the bills that are up for submission in the next, oh God, month and a bit.
It's a grim month for bills, I'm not going to lie.
I mean, put it this way, yeah, it's definitely going to be on there. Now, here's an interesting thing is, so coming this week, I'll just flip this over into the right place so I can actually, so I can make this all work. So this week, it will be Scrutiny Week in Parliament. So these are the submitters that are going to be out there through the different select committees throughout the period.
Women have a ministry? I didn't know women have a ministry. That's crazy.
That's been around for a long time. Lila Haray was one of the Minister for Women. She brought in maternity. No, was it maternity? Yeah, maternity leave. Not did it later translate to paid parental leave? I'm not sure, but yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know there was a whole ministry because they don't seem to do much for women, but that's yeah.
Yeah. So these are the different things that are out there for Scrutiny Week.
Jesus, a lot.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be a big week of Parliament.
Oh yes, and especially when the House is not sitting.
Is scrutiny week's one of those ones where they have to stay for like quite long hours, eh?
Yes, and it's where it's done by the select committees, not by the House in general.
Yeah, right.
So as you can sit there, I think that's another one we want to look at, Brooklyn Golden, because we haven't heard or seen anything on here for a long time.
She's been fucking hiding away from.
Well, considering she was like the face of urgency last year.
Well, I feel like though she was, but then like she was getting a lot of criticism and was not holding herself well.
I think it was the bills as well. So the bills she had to front because she was Minister of Labour.
Yeah.
So yes, as you can see there, there's a lot that is happening this week. As you can see, the list of speakers. So yeah. Oh, this could be interesting. Dave and Erica having to be next door to each other.
Oh, actually, that could be interesting, to be honest.
Yeah.
Actually, I do like the sound of that. Even though I hate fucking listening to that cunt, honestly.
Oh, and like if you look at any bill with education that he's in charge of, Erica Stanford is nowhere near Parliament.
Interesting. I mean,
you
I don't
always
know
look at the Erica Stanford is never in Parliament when David Seymour's education bills are going through.
Honestly, I respect that. I respect being so disgusted by David. And you're like, I can't even physically be there.
I think it says a lot because I feel that David Seymour is literally undermining Erica Stanford.
He's undermining everyone, technically.
Like Erica Stanford is actually a good minister who actually is there for the right reasons. She's one of the decent lot of this latest lot that's in Luxon's government. She's actually trying to make changes. She's listening to the sector, and David Seymour's coming in and parroting his talking points. And it's really weird when you sit there and you watch like I thought she was just shouty shout, but she actually is knowing how to actually put her words into action. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I think there was a question. Someone was asking if Costello's going to be in there. I didn't know where you've got that link to that page you were looking at.
I can sit down there and put that into the live chat. So that
just be good for people to be able to nosy.
Oh, see, this is the thing is Laura does all of this.
Nah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so whenever you see these links and all that keep popping up, she's the one who's posted them in there.
Yes.
Yeah. And see, I'm doing effectively what would be 3 different people's jobs tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I've been managing to keep up the comments on there, but I've literally done everything.
I mean, you're doing a good job. That's why I thought I'd point it out for you, just so that we can give people the link, because I mean I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who want to go see if some of their favorite people to hate are gonna be
they can watch it online.
God, yeah. I mean I'm just gonna actually Costello, she is making an appearance on the health one.
Yep, that would sound about right. She's been in the health select committee before already. We covered a segment on it quite
she's just before Matt Ducey.
Oh, okay. That'll be interesting. Yeah. Oh, for those who have watched us tonight, thank you for bearing with us. And we will get out there and we're going to continue with post-show after chats after the closing credits. And we'll see everyone back here for at least 8 o'clock next week. And I'll be talking to Laura to see if we can do an urgency show as well, because we there is potentially a lot of footage for us to go through.
Nah, fair enough. Well, hopefully you guys don't have too much to go through next week.
Oh, we'll see what happens. Yeah. So, we'll see everyone back next week. Have a good evening.
See you guys. See you on Friday.
Thank you for watching The Order Paper, your express ticket to the New Zealand House of Representatives. Every episode, we unravel the complex world of legislation, debate, and democracy. From bills to select committees, we've got it all covered. From our team of political commentators who will dissect and explain what's happened, so you can remain up to date on what's happened in the Aotearoa, New Zealand Parliament. To support our channel, you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/itsinthaballot. The Order Paper podcast is brought to you by It's